welcome everyone. A good post-lunch welcome back for those in Europe. And hello to Alexander. I see Celine. I see Gabor as well. Nice to see you again. Nice to see everyone join our webinar on where Europe's next BESS wave. So if you work in BESS and you've been networking over the past half a year, you probably have had some version of this question, which is people come up and they ask you, okay, where do you see the next market? Or where do you have to build next in Europe? I think to me, it was one of the biggest questions that was asked in our Dutch storage event. Everyone said Germany, spoiler alert. So growth is a major topic as the sector expands. This year is also a very interesting year where more than 10 countries are beyond the 1 gigawatt hour mark. And everyone has a different answer. Everyone's looking at a different market. There's Czechia, Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, Poland. But today we will look at 4. So Greece, Portugal, Czechia, and Ireland. Coincidentally, the 4 markets that we're holding BESS seminar in. We have, as you can see, a market intelligence expert, an industry association voice, and a developer who is looking and building in these markets right now. So let's get into it. This is the agenda. So I'm doing the opening right now. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Dee. And then we have the presentations in this order. Like I mentioned, we have market intelligence, industry association, and a developer. And then we have also time at the end for Q&A. A bit about Solarplaza, where I come from. We were established in 2004. Our CEO, Edwin, has a strong belief that solar is the answer, which indeed it is, along with BESS. And we have organized over 250 events over the world. And we firmly believe that, expanding knowledge and network will help us reach a brighter future. We also have a platform. So the solarplaza.com, it's a unified platform for events where you can network outside of it. And then you can talk directly with customizable pages. And we have right now 4,500 plus organizations. We have a biz board where you can talk about business like a marketplace. If, for example, someone is selling a home battery, I know that was an issue we had a while. And then we also have the academy where the webinar that you are seeing now will also sit there in the end. So as I mentioned, our BESS seminars, we have 4, as you can see, and they're taking place in all these countries. You can take a screenshot, but you will also get it at the event as well. And joining this webinar, you can have a 10% discount code if that is also your interest. Technical side, if you have any questions, use the question box on the top right, like I'm pointing at it here, and we will answer them after all the presentations. There will be lots of times for Q&A, so put them all there. Any technical issues, use the question box as well. I have my trusty colleague, Tom, here on the technical side, who will help you out if you are running into any issues. The slides and full recordings will be available afterwards. You will get them, don't worry. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker to turn on his camera, and it is Jörn Richstein. He is the research lead for Pan-European Power Markets from Aurora, and he is going to talk us through the market overview. You will have the mouse control shortly, and the floor will be yours.
Great. Thanks a lot for having me on. I'm very happy also to substitute today for Eva Zimmermann, a colleague in my team at Aurora Energy Research, our resident flex expert. What I'd like to do today is provide you a bit with our view on how to navigate the next wave of European battery investments, and basically what we see as attractive markets in Europe. To maybe first set the scene a bit, let me maybe introduce the main drivers that we see for BESS investments especially in the long run. And then, of course, there are also there's also a major short-term driver for BESS investments as well. So what we have here is on the top left corner, the first major driver, namely the installed variable renewable capacity, which we project to increase by 151% from now until 2050, with essentially solar PV being the largest chunk in terms of installed gigawatts of capacity, but also increases in onshore and then later on also in offshore wind. And essentially, since all of these variable renewable technologies have an intermittent output, but we still need to meet demand, essentially this increased supply of variability in the system also needs to be matched up with an increase of flexible generation or storage technologies. Which I think leads me to a second point on who's supplying that flexibility. And there essentially the other big part of the system that so far provides that flexibility, namely thermal generation in Europe, is in our view going to have a downward trend. Essentially from left to the right, you see the time scale and the produced terawatt hours that we are forecasting across Europe in the coming decades. And while first mostly coal is being phased out, a lot of it policy driven, of course, in the big markets like Germany, that's an explicit policy, but also the ETS, it's doing its own to phase out the coal generation. This in the medium to long term is actually also affecting other thermal technologies such as CCGTs and to a lesser degree even nuclear power. Hence, new flexible technologies are needed to provide that flexibility. Third is that we actually are projecting to have an increased overall system size. So in terms of annual power demand in Europe, we see that increasing by 58% from now until 2050, with we would expect some sort of inflection point soon where we actually see growing demand until 2030. And that's on the one hand driven by growing base demand, essentially continued use of electricity, but also let's say special demand drivers, namely the electrification of heat, both for households as well as industry, the uptake of hydrogen production and then also consumption, as well as data center demand, as well as the electrification of road transport. And essentially with a bigger system size, again, you also need more flexible technologies to again meet demand with supply. To maybe give a bit of a qualitative rating about the demand, I would see a bit of a downside risk on the hydrogen part of it. And so this is still our central view, but there's a downside risk that this does not materialize at the same scale. On the other hand, the upside is probably on the data centers, which might be growing faster. And if those risks would materialize, essentially data centers are less flexible than hydrogen, which would also push the need for flexible technology. And finally, the last long-term driver are the falling battery costs, which have already fallen by around 52% over the last 5 years, and we still do project them to fall further. There is a bit of a slowdown in our view as compared to the last decade, as essentially the very fast learning components, the battery cells, battery components are now already only a smaller part of the overall BESS investment costs. And more local components such as development costs, EPC soft costs, grid connection costs, and so on, are likely not going to have the same scaling and learning rates that we saw for these centrally mass-produced battery cell technologies. And then the final driver is, of course, also the ancillary service markets, where essentially batteries are very, very attractive as compared to the existing technologies serving those markets. And the attractiveness of those markets is essentially also driving the current wave of battery investments. Now to go on, what does that mean for the attractiveness of markets throughout Europe? So we had a look at that as part of a report we wrote, which essentially compares a battery market attractiveness across Europe in 28 markets, which we cover in this report, which are all marked here in a light yellow color. And maybe to quickly summarize the report, we essentially grade markets by market size. So what is the expected investment opportunity in these markets, the availability of revenue streams, are these wholesale markets, ancillary service markets, and which ones are available for access to BESS, the policy environment, are there favorable subsidy schemes available, how's grid connection and permitting processes look like, and finally the project economics. And in this overall scoring, we do see, to maybe mirror the starting point a bit, also Germany right at the top in terms of overall attractiveness, also driven of course by the market size, followed by Great Britain and Italy. We also have some new enters here, Romania and Bulgaria, which came new into our top 10. To move on, so what is the scale of investments? What I'm going to show here is essentially the announced pipeline of battery investments. So basically announced projects which have a, let's say, decent chance of realization, and this essentially looks at the projects that are intending to build. Now, this is not quite the same as the projects that are going to be built, and so our own forecast, which you can also find in our report, takes a bit of a more conservative view, which this figure, but I'll shortly guide you through it. So in 2024, we stood at around 10 gigawatt of installed capacity, battery capacity across Europe. And at the end of November in 2025, we were at around 17 gigawatt of installed battery capacity. Right now, I'd see that figure at around 21 gigawatt of installed capacity by the mid of this year. And what's driving this build out are essentially some of the larger markets, of course, like Great Britain, which has a very large pipeline, Germany, Spain, Italy, but of course also smaller markets in aggregation really contribute to this massive investment wave that we are seeing in Europe. So for Ireland, one of the focus markets of this session, the announced pipeline capacity stands at around 6 gigawatts. For Greece, that's around 4 gigawatts, and essentially for sorry, I jumped here. And essentially for Portugal, the announced pipeline capacity is at around 2 gigawatts, which we still need to discount a bit because maybe not all projects are going to materialize. So now on moving to my last slides, which I think is I would like to focus a bit more again on this session. And as part of the report, we basically did an exercise of comparing how large is the investment volume until 2050. So what's the addressable market size for battery investments versus what are the project economics. And while some of the top ranked markets like Germany actually have both a very large total investment volume and attractive project economics, some of the smaller markets, also like the ones that we are discussing in this session, can also be actually quite attractive investment cases. So Greece here, for example, has around 5 to 10 billion of addressable market by 2050, but in our view actually delivers one of the highest IRRs that we see in our forecasts, with above 13% of return on investment possible. And this is driven by particularly attractive revenue conditions. But also Portugal and Ireland show pretty attractive IRRs of around 11%, despite lower projected investment volumes. And there are also some market changes which look to be quite interesting. For example, the opening of the wholesale market in Ireland. With that, I would conclude my very brief overview of the European battery investment landscape. And I'm looking forward to the presentation of the other presenters and the discussion afterwards.
Thank you, Jörn. Again, if anyone has any questions, you can drop it in the question box and we will get to them after the other two presentations. All right, thank you. So Jörn has given us the data overview of the momentum of where battery storage is building across Europe. Now I want to zoom in into one of the specific markets, Czechia, from one of the people closest to the ground. Here he is. He has been inside the Czech market since 2007, and he now leads the association at the center of the country's battery storage sector. You can see the banners behind him as it shifts from project proposals to actual construction. So please welcome Jan Fousek, CEO of Akubat, Czechia. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dee, and thanks to Jörn for his presentation. I just feel sorry that I haven't seen Czech Republic in the graph of promising markets, but I have like 3 slides to convince you that given the size of our nation and of our country, we might be one of the promising markets. Not definitely the ones like Bulgaria or Romania, if we are around Central and Eastern Europe, but I guess it's we have something to offer. So again, I'm Jan Fousek. I'm CEO of Czech Energy Storage Association, also chairman of the Solar Association, and I'm here to give you some of the numbers and tell you a little bit about the markets. To give you some figures, we have, or at the end of 2025, we had installed about 2.5 gigawatt hours of batteries. As you can see, most of them come from the residential sector, which is one of the most, I would say, attractive, or used to be. Now some of the subsidies stopped because of the new anti-EU and anti-renewable government we unfortunately have at the moment after recent elections. The subsidies for residential sector stopped. Maybe it's good, but definitely the interest of investors and of installation companies moved to CNI and to utility size sector. We connected the first standalone batteries last year after the change of the law, which is called Lex Renewables number 3. Sorry, it was just a delay. I'm coming back. Yes, Lex Res 3, which is effective from October 2025. And as you can see, since the law is effective since only October 2025, and we already witnessed 3 quite reasonable size standalone projects, we believe, especially seeing the pipeline of large-scale battery projects, that we will definitely witness much larger number than that. So we can expect a strong growth of the large-scale battery market, particularly the standalone BESS, which is in the center of interest of investors. Already the projects under development are in hundreds of megawatts and in higher hundreds of megawatt hours, just very close to be connected to the grid. And so we already see a large projects. However, the future sector development, and that's why all the hesitation, now we have some banking finance hesitating, the banks financing usually the BESS and collocated projects started hesitating because of the ancillary market being full, and everyone is waiting for the result of so-called new tariff structure, which is related to network tariffs, network payments, as you can see on the next slide where we are very active. We can talk about the battery boom because, as you will see on my last slide, which will be the next one, we submitted more than 250 gigawatts of standalone batteries, which means in half C 2 hours duration systems, more than 500 gigawatt hours of batteries. However, installed was, as you could have seen, only 2.5 gigawatt hours, let's say, at now in the middle of the year, it might be something about 3.5 gigawatt hours, but we are far from 500 gigawatt hours. That's why I call this slide something like a Czech battery boom, but in the brackets, the applications boom. However, the market is quite attractive because we are quite a late comer, but we already managed as a country to remove the double charging. BESS is a subject of public interest and many more positives to be here to develop the batteries in Czechia. I mentioned the most important thing we are working on now. It's called the new tariff structure, which is supposed to be effective from the 1st of January 2027, which means all the new installations, they are being developed, even those large installations I told you about, are heavily dependent on the new tariff structure, where significant discounts for batteries, standalone, but also for hybridized PV plus BESS are proposed. We proposed them, Energy Regulatory Office agreed on them, and the Council of the Energy Regulatory Office passed them. However, there is a strong opposition against the discounts for BESS from DSOs and anti-renewables movements, that's how I call it, which of course gained a little bit stronger voice than during the previous pro-renewables, pro-EU government we had. But we think we will be fine. Maybe some further adjustments to be made for the discounts, but maybe the discount is not going to be 100% of the payments or 90%, but it's going to be 80%. But still, we believe it will be very attractive. And my last slide to tell you some kind of the summary, to show you a little bit about the pipeline, and it is also the proof and the evidence why I think the Czech Republic should be in the Aurora research presentation. These are the BESS connection requests. That's the pipeline of applications submitted already. However, capacity of ancillary services are only about 950 in positive and about 330 megawatts in negative energy, which it shows that this limit has been exceeded like 300 times or something like that. That's obvious, and we can see it on other markets like in Germany and in surrounding countries. I would like to remind you that Czechia is in the part of the balancing zone of Germany, Czech Republic, and Austria, which means we share the power prices more or less, and also our ancillary services are connected. That the future is merchant flexibility with some cross-border trading, algo trading, day ahead, futures imbalances, and of course a lot of potential lies in industrial flexibility. So my let's say wish for the future, for next coming 3 or 4 years, we believe that about 5 till 8 gigawatts will be connected until 2030. Again, it will be heavily dependent on the new tariff structure, but we believe it's going to be success. It's not going to be at least like really shut down at all. As the sector and Energy Storage Association, together with Solar Association, are in regular discussions on the highest level, including ministers, head of DSOs, TSO, Energy Regulatory Office, etc. And as we will discuss probably in this webinar, and you are very much aware of that, similar issues are to be witnessed in other markets across the whole Europe. So revenue stacking as the future, that's everything from me within the time given, and I am happy to answer any of your question. I hope I told you everything I was supposed to.
You did. Thank you, Jan. All the best also for the new tariff structure.
Thank you.
Our fingers here. So again, any questions for Jan? You can put it in the question box. We will get to it at the end. We have one closing presentation. So Jan has given us nicely the view inside one market in motion. Now I want to take us to someone who, from their developer side, has to make the call on which markets to enter, how they analyze it, and then go and potentially build there. So he is on the ground building battery storage in markets that most of the industry is still watching, including some live projects in Romania, I believe. And supporting the country's storage target. So please welcome Sebastiaan Groenhuijsen from Ion Ventures, who will take us through the developer's perspective.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dee. We tested this all beforehand, and now my computer is not letting the camera turn on, but I believe you can hear me, yes?
We can hear you. Yes,
okay.
Indeed.
I don't want to keep people waiting. I will get it working during the Q&A. Apologies. Okay. I am a real person here, guys, not an AI chatbot, and I will get the camera working just as soon as I can. Good. My name is Sebastiaan Groenhuijsen. I am the head of strategy and new markets at Ion Ventures. And it is a pleasure to be with you guys here today. Thank you, Jörn. Thank you, Jan, for your first presentations, and thank you, Dee, to you and the whole Solarplaza team for inviting me. Good. So I have the pleasure of talking to you guys about the same things we've been talking about so far, but now from a developer's perspective. So just a little bit of background on Ion Ventures. We're an international energy transition specialist. So we focus at the minute primarily on grid scale PV and grid scale storage. But for us, it actually goes a bit further than just development. So we don't just look at the engineering and the design behind renewable energy projects. We actually come with our own back-end investment. So we're in early with our back-end investors. We develop the projects, we design them, we then deliver them. So while we're not an EPC, we project manage all the projects that we have into full operational status. And then ultimately our goal is to own and operate a portfolio of assets in every country that we work in. So we go a bit broader than just development. Just to give a little bit of background in terms of how we achieve that, I mean, we have built a team, it says here of 20 plus, but we actually have more than 25 colleagues now with a very broad skill set, of course, covering the entire development, engineering, grid connection space. We also have extensive experience from renewables that have already been built in the UK. Of course, a big portion of that has been the offshore wind portion, which has grown massively since already about 15 years ago. Then the next piece is that we have extensive oversight and governance and also experience pre-Ion Ventures. Over 3 gigawatts of distributed energy has been delivered by the team if you count up all of their previous experience. And then something that's very important to us is all of our energy sector partnerships. Now, just to put it into context for our pipeline, we are based in London, and primarily our pipeline, the most advanced part of our pipeline is in Great Britain and in Ireland. And in those two regions, our home markets, if we can call it that, we have a combined 750 megawatts worth of projects, primarily utility scale BESS, which are under development. Now, without going into details on something wonderful called connections reform, right now, what we have in the UK, I would say, is the complete pipeline. We will not add to that pipeline anytime soon, but rather we build that pipeline as quickly as we can. So currently we have around 300 megawatts of projects which are under construction in both GB, Ireland, and Northern Ireland. Where we look to next, and where, as part of my role as head of new markets, where we look to next and where we put most of our development focus at this time is in Europe. And I will go into a bit more detail. And of course, the question is, where are we developing those projects? Dee already mentioned Romania. I will also go into a bit more of an example on Poland. Jan, I don't yet have a project, or I don't yet have a good pipeline, I should say, in the Czech Republic. So looking forward to maybe speaking more about that one. But Europe is right now our main development focus for all kinds of reasons, which I'll go into a little bit more detail on. You will also hear me talk a little bit about South and Southeast Asia during this presentation. Of course, here the focus today, guys, is on Europe. However, we already think ahead and look ahead to what we think will be the next big markets. And there we have quite I would say it's longer term, longer time horizon projects, but we have a big pipeline building up in South and Southeast Asia. That's where we see we will all need to go next. Good. So just a little bit of context, right? And some of it's already been covered by Jörn in the first part of the presentation, but just to kind of set the scene again from my perspective, from a developer's perspective, the situation that we're in right now is that we expect that total energy demand globally will increase by 25% between now and 2040. But I don't have to tell probably any of the individuals on this call, that's actually only a very small piece of the story, because as Jörn showed in the first part of our presentations, electrification will actually mean that our electricity demand, not our global energy demand, will increase by much, much more than 25%. Now, that combined with the fact that we expect renewable energy generation and also demand to grow exponentially, which again, Jörn showed us very well in the beginning, means that at the end of the day, we see that between now and actually 2030, 1,200 gigawatts of battery storage will be required. And that's a massive number. And that's a number that is, you know, unprecedented. And if you look at how fast BESS is being built right now, is something that we're not close to yet, but we are accelerating, which is the important part. But again, I believe that all of you know this, battery storage is the key to that. It's the key bridge between intermittency of renewables to also getting our entire energy production and energy generation picture to where we want it to be, which is as close to net zero or as close to clean as we can possibly get. Let the slide change. There we go. Good. And just to put a couple of figures on that, right? So I'll jump around regions a little bit here. But we see for ourselves, from a developer point of view, we see the current main trends in the regions that we work in, which is that in the UK, as an example now, we expect that 75% of renewable energy, of total energy, will be renewable between 2030 and 2035 as an average. And we're already accelerating towards that number very quickly in the UK. Now, critically, from a financing point of view, 2025 is the first year that we can confidently say that actually solar PV was confirmed as the lowest energy source and exceeded coal as the largest generation source globally. And this is a key tipping point, which we had not reached before. So not only is the volume there, but also the price is there that you really can't argue with solar. That solar generation piece also increased 144% between 2019 and 2024 in Europe. Right, and that is only accelerating. We're just getting to the beginning of that. Every chart you look at in terms of solar deployment in Europe is a hockey stick, and we are very much on that near vertical part of that hockey stick. And again, maybe to keep a little bit of context on the other regions that we look at, we actually see that annual energy transition investment in Asia, and this is excluding China, will exceed 1 trillion by 2030. This is 28 times what's being invested right now in 2024. And this is also why we already think ahead beyond just Europe to what's going on in South and in Southeast Asia. So a little bit more into the details. I mean, how do we actually choose the markets, and how do we actually decide where we're going to go and how we're going to approach these markets, and then ultimately not just develop the projects, but ultimately build the projects. And for us, our position, as I described in the beginning, is one that really bridges the financial piece all the way through to development, delivery, and ultimately owning and operating. So this means that for us as Ion Ventures, we focus a lot on that gap. What is that gap between development and capital, which both manages the risk and delivers the profitable assets at scale? This is what we want. This is what our investors want. And ultimately, we believe this is what will help the energy transition get to where it needs to be. And I'll go into a bit more detail on the next slide, but of course we start with some basics, right? I mean, markets are targeted according to size, the capabilities, and the probability of operational success. And you see there some examples between the UK, Asia Pacific, and Europe. But what also gets interesting is, for example, in Asia, there's markets that in certain markets we can unlock capabilities that we can't, for example, in Europe with, for example, storage assets. So there's adjacencies which we don't necessarily think about, but which have huge impact on the energy transition in certain countries. And then all of this we need to, of course, analyze through a very rigorous model and make sure that not just financially, but also from an engineering and a design point of view, and from a project structuring point of view, we have everything lined up. So let me give a tangible example, right? So ultimately, before we go into a market, we need to assess a variety of factors to make sure that it is an appropriate market, both in general for renewable energy development, but also specifically for us, for Ion Ventures. And the way we do it is, it's not rocket science. It's a weighted scoring system based on the example that you see here is for the Polish market. based on a variety of factors. And right at the top of the chart, in terms of the highest weighting, you see market size and scalability. We want to see that potential beyond just a project or two. Profitability and bankability / investability. Now, the fact that there's so much weight on the financial element might surprise some people, seeing as we're a renewable energy developer, but we really see that as key. There's no point in developing projects if we don't know upfront that they're profitable and bankable. What's equally weighted with profitability and bankability is deliverability, right? We want to make sure that we can actually build the project and actually get it delivered, right? There's some very other important elements in there. The only other one that I want to touch on right now is the policy environment. This policy environment is rapidly changing, especially I would say in the Eastern European space, where we're spending quite a bit of our time right now. This is something that throws unknowns and uncertainties into what we do. It's something that we have to deal with, and we're happy to work with local partners on. But it is one that we need to keep a very close eye on, and can be quite complex. Now, once we've decided that we're going to work in a particular country and work and start to develop particular projects, the next step in our process is a very rigorous process. And what this outlines, and I won't read into every single detail here, but what this shows is that all the way from site origination, through to the grid application, project delivery, and ultimately O&M and optimization, we have a very specific process that we follow. We have a very specific process that our investors expect us to follow, and we apply that process in every country that we work in. Of course, there's differences country by country, there's differences project by project, but ultimately the experience that we've built up over almost 8 years here in the UK and Ireland has let us build a model and a process which we can follow and replicate and duplicate in other markets as well. And ultimately, this is the way that we operate. Now, last but not least, as part of that process is, of course, risk management. And this is something that from day one of any country that we look at and any project that we look at, we take into account. We look at risk from a financial development, operational, and a construction point of view. We look at those separately and then also holistically for the whole project. But it's really important for us to have risk managed from day one. If we don't, then we, from experience, can see that we run into issues later on. So I think I've already gone just a little bit over my time. So apologies to Solarplaza for taking a bit more time than at first expected. But just a couple of key takeaways from my side. Right, the potential and the need for battery storage is huge, and it's only going to grow based on the increase in renewable generation. From our perspective, it's important to think just beyond just development. It's important to think about the entire life cycle of a project and really deliver something that's profitable, not just design something that works. Project selection needs to be done in a rigorous way, and it needs to be done in a very thorough way. Something I didn't mention maybe in enough detail before was the local partner element. We see this as absolutely critical to have strong local partners on the ground from development, also into EPC and into delivery. And last but not least, it's critical for us to actively manage risk in a very proactive way. This really makes sure that our projects are actually deliverable in reality and not just on paper. That's it from my side. I will try and get my camera working now for the Q&A session.
Thank you, Sebastiaan. And yes, I can confirm he is a real person. I will welcome up all the other speakers. We have time now for Q&A. Thank you already for some of your questions. And yeah, we will get to them. So Jan, Jörn, if you can get your cameras up as well. Amazing. So I will start with a question to Jörn. And of course, Jan, Sebastiaan, if you want to chime in, if you have a different perspective, please. So it says your slides project a 52% drop in the BESS system cost by 2050. Are there any specific components or supply chain shifts you see that will drive this?
Yes. So let me maybe first start addressing the question by mentioning that we do not project a 52% drop in BESS system costs by 2035. This was more referring to the past drop in costs that we saw. So what actually I would say that the drop that we see towards 2030 is more in order of magnitude less. I would rather see it around 5 to 10%. And I think the major reason is that there are also a couple of so technological learning continues. So production processes will continue to improve. Costs are going to continue fall in the long run. I would also see still sort of learning on the one hand, simply purely the battery system, but I think also the integration in terms of sort of combined delivery of battery systems with the inverter, balance of systems, sort of integration as much as possible in the earlier steps of the supply chain can also further drive costs down. Whereas for sort of the development, grid connection, EPC soft costs, and so on, I would see less learning, and these costs in terms of a relative basis will dominate more and more, and that sort of slows down the learning over the long run. And on the other hand, I think there's a bit of upward pressure in terms of maybe a rebalancing of the market in China. So I mean, there's really has been a cutthroat competition in terms of battery supplies. So I think the question is, will that market rebalance, and over what time frame? On the other hand, there's also a question a bit of the raw material prices behind, and we're also really coming out of a low, I think, in lithium carbonate and so on. So the question is also how do those prices develop in future?
Okay, thank you. I'm curious then too, Jörn, if you see this as something that will impact the Czech Republic as well, as you're looking to build up the.
Thank you for that question. First of all, I have to say before I answer that we bought the analysis from Aurora Research exactly for Energy Regulatory Office. So we cooperate with them, but here I dare to a little bit disagree with this discount, because I took with the delegation of the Czech companies the part in your these of Solarplaza China battery tour last year. We visited basically all the factories. And also, if you read other reports, I believe that the margin they get are so low. The producers, the large, let's say the top 10, the tier 1 producers, the margin is so low that they don't have where to drop. Now we see hundreds of gigawatt hours. I read somewhere like 200 gigawatt hours just of large scale systems are based somewhere in the ports, in the harbors, waiting to be shifted, waiting for their customers. And that gives me the conviction that the prices are not going to drop significantly. And I'm not saying it's not going to happen, Jörn, so please don't take it wrong, but we rather keep the expectations from our members and from the market to be like more stable, and we rather don't say it's gonna rise, it's not gonna fall, but let's count on the prices they are here now. But I would rather believe into the slight rise than drop.
I think we're not so much misaligned. So I think I started out with saying we don't see a very strong drop, right? So I would see I would see actually rather if anything, more of a moderate drop. And then I think after 2030, as the learning effects take over again, I would again like expect maybe a bit of a drop again. But I think in terms of the short term, yeah, the upward pressures, I mean, also with the VAT in China as well, was another upward pressure.
That's something else. Yes, that's something else. The VAT issue imposing, and maybe a CBAM is also another thing which might affect the Chinese technologies. But even from the long term, I wouldn't expect that the learning curve would have such an impact. But it's good that we don't agree in everything that makes this webinar more attractive.
I saw also Sebastiaan nodding maybe a good perspective on this, because it will impact your business case as a developer. To what extent do you weight this potential risk?
I'll try and keep my answer short, because we talk about this all the time, and I've raised it at Solarplaza panels and discussions before, actually. But look, long story short term, we actually have seen from our side, which is looking into the future, right? This is for battery deliveries in 2027, 2028, in some cases even 2029. We've actually seen our quoted prices from our EPCs go up by 10% year on year. I'm talking about battery storage right now, even more on PV, by the way, but that's a different story. And that is expected, and VAT is one part of that. A bit of consolidation in the Chinese market is a second piece of that. And ultimately, it is actually a price that we're very happy to pay, because it also comes with the same amount of increase in quality, right? So a lot of those very low prices that you saw, we saw also very low quality, or lower than we can accept quality. So we were already, from an ION perspective, we were already looking at, everyone says tier one and suppliers and OEMs. We were already in that bracket, and their prices have raised a little bit, but maybe not by the full 10%. Now, I agree, Jörn, I think there is another dip coming, certainly. I think that there's a bit more, I don't know exactly how much, I think there's a bit more efficiency that can be gained from a price and from a financial point of view in battery systems. I don't think it's significant, is the reality from my perspective.
Okay, thank you. Then the next question, also for all of you.
Maybe one technical detail. What we are dropping.
Final response.
Just a final response, just to make sure on one part, when I'm saying we're dropping in the long run, this is all in terms of real costs, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of nominal terms, that's a different story as well.
Okay, then the second question, maybe also another number to be debated, but we can start with your stats. You mentioned a 122 gigawatt pipeline. The question is here, what percentage do you actually expect to get realized? And maybe Jan, you can give that perspective also on the Czech Republic. And Sebastiaan, maybe you can give a reflection on all your projects that you have going, to what extent you can share what gets realized too. But we'll start with Jörn.
Yes, sure. And I will also try to keep my answer short so we have enough time for the follow-up discussion. So in terms of what are the 122 gigawatts, that's the near-term project pipeline. These are already sort of higher quality projects. I mean, if we were going to look at sort of grid connection requests, we'll be another magnitude larger, right? And I would say below 80% of those might be realized, or 70, 80%. I would
Is this optimistic or pessimistic? Like, if you can qualify this take?
I would say 70% is probably the conservative view, and closer to our own view.
Okay. Jan, in the context of Czech Republic.
I had this figure in my presentation already. We expect much lower number to be realized at the end, and we come out from the expectations of Czech TSO, which we cooperate very closely with, and we shared our data together with our analysis. And if we put together ancillary services and merchant flexibility all together, and the size of the German, Czech, and Austrian common market, the trading zone, we concluded that there is a space for another between 5 till maximum 10 gigawatts of new batteries coming online till 2030, rather less, but rather like 5, since we have another 2.5 installed already. I would say like 5-6 gigawatts of the new batteries to be online in till 2030. And we also have to count on the new sources coming online, because as you might know, in Czech Republic, the new law, we have sometimes like a middle age, but yeah, that's what we are and where we are. Like a new 6 gigawatts of the new gas turbines, which was pushed through by ČEZ, the national Czech utility company and one of the largest utility companies in the whole Europe. The new law, which basically allows the state to finance the new 6 gigawatts of peak gas-powered plants, which is another competition for BESS and for other flexible sources, generally for the new flexibility, let's say decentralized flexibility. So that's what we all have to take into the consideration. So I would expect that like maximum 5% in case of Czech Republic compared to the application, and given the fact that 1/3 of them is one company who is reselling the request as a speculation, AI generated applications, and another, I would say 1/3 are just speculative applications. That's why such a low number, around 3, maximum 4 or 5%.
Okay, clear. Sebastiaan, what are you seeing in your practice?
I mean, first of all, I'll say that the number that Jörn showed us, so the 70 to 80% of 122 gigawatts for Europe, that's in line with what we expect. Maybe I'll take a slightly different perspective in terms of how I want to answer this. It won't be enough, right? If you look at what's happening with demand and electrification and what we actually need on the grid, it's not enough. And it's not enough because of, first of all, we're not investing enough money. That I would say is number one. At least that's my perspective. And then, I mean, this is something that probably a lot of people on this call have heard before, and I'm not complaining about it. It's just a reality. But it's also, to a large part, because of grid constraints and the lack of infrastructure to actually connect more. Right. So we're a little bit in between a rock and a hard place in terms of we want more renewables, and therefore we need and we want more storage. We're not building it fast enough, and we're also not financing it fast enough. And some of that's also being hamstrung or slowed down a bit by each individual country within the European continent figuring out from a regulatory and from a policy point of view, how do we navigate these massive grid queues? How do we navigate speculative projects? How do we make sure that the projects being that are applying for a grid connection are actually going to get built? There is no easy answer to that. And you look across the continent, there's been every version of how do you make that happen. And everyone is progressing. My perspective is we need even more. And if we look until 2030, it's a great number. It's a great start. It won't be enough.
Then I want to end on maybe a practical question. Also, we had some really nice feedback to thank you on the perspectives on cost reduction for all three. So I just wanted to make that known. Thank you, Tapan. So then the final practical question, thank you all for your questions as well, is let's talk a bit about local partners. I think, Sebastiaan, you mentioned it was one of the key things you do as a developer. Jan has a lot of perspective, I believe, being the organization where local partners gather. Maybe if we take the Czech Republic as a case study, how would you approach the best practice of working with identifying and getting a successful project off the ground with a local partner? And start with Sebastiaan.
Sure. I mean, look, this is for us critical, right? So our home markets, so where we have our own people on the ground and have done since the beginning of Ion Ventures, so about 8 years. So our home markets are the UK and Ireland. Everywhere we work outside of the UK and Ireland, we start. It's the very first thing that we do is we find the right local partner and we partner with them, usually exclusively for that country, right? Because we typically want to work with one entity there. And this for us is absolutely critical. I mean, there's the obvious reasons, which is language and culture and regulatory environment and all those things that I'm sitting here in London. I can be in, I'll use the Czech Republic, Jan. I can be there whenever you need me to be there, but I can't be there every day, right? And that's just a simple reality. And that kind of a partnership early on to build that trust and to build the framework of responsibilities that gets projects over the line is critical. And ultimately, it also leads to a win-win situation financially because we develop the projects together. So for me, that's absolutely critical in terms of how we choose these local partners. It depends a bit per country. But ultimately, it's about building relationships as in any part of business. And that takes time and that takes effort, usually in person and face-to-face. And that's something that we do on a very regular basis. And I know we're talking here about Europe, but that's also why we have Alibi, be it a small one, but we have an office in Singapore to do this also for our South and Southeast Asian markets, right? So it's absolutely critical for us. Without that, for us, there are no projects outside of the UK and Ireland.
I would like to underline the Sebastiaan words to add, of course, from the perspective of two national associations, it's important to be a member of the national association. It doesn't mean it has to be us, but you are happy to. But on the market you work, it's good to be the member of some association because there usually it's the level of latest legislation updates and frameworks. Concentration, and that's why it's basically both hands, right? You get, on one hand, you get the information. On the other hand, if the association is effective, is that you can have your voice to change the regulation. That's exactly how we work. We are members of all the working groups where our members cannot be, but through us, that's the way how they can, you know, influence, for example, exactly the new tariff structure, the less renewables, number 3, the new legislation. And of course, this is where the know-how is gathered, right? And that's the first point. And the second one, only one sentence, the experience from mature markets like the ones in UK, in Germany, in the Nordic countries, which is the region which has in Scandinavia, which has not been mentioned today, but I think it's one of the really leading examples. And some of our members are active, or the most active members in Czech Republic, or have their assets in Germany, in Nordic, or in the UK, or in Benelux countries. And that's the know-how they can bring to Czech Republic also.
Thank you both. So I believe, Jörn, you're also working a lot on a global scale. If you could wrap us up with some practical insights on how we could indeed grow in new markets and build good partnerships.
Yeah, so I think maybe to build on the point of my colleagues. So I mean, personally, in my team, we sort of take this pan-European view, right? So we have this overview, do reports on comparing renewable investment cases, battery investment cases throughout Europe. But maybe to iterate the point that the colleagues made, power markets are local markets, right? Similarly, like power cannot so easily be stored, it cannot so easily be transported. And hence, sort of what happens locally is really determining how the market evolves, and essentially also because you have local regulation, also the knowledge of that regulation and what the different positions of market participants are in influencing that regulation is really important to get your forecasts right. So I'm actually quite happy that I do not need to do that all in my team, but I can actually build on the local knowledge that we have in Aurora, where we have a rather large footprint across Europe, right? Like where we have several European offices with local native speakers that actually look into these markets, travel regularly to these markets and do group meetings with market participants, so that we actually know what's happening and can factor that into our forecast. So to wrap up, yes, it's very nice to give sort of a global or European overview of these markets, but you can really only do that well if you actually sort of have the local teams on the ground that you can build on.
All right, thank you for those final words. Then maybe what I can do as a segue is a nice way to start finding those local networks and partners and being on the ground is gasp at our events. We have a few coming up on all these markets that we mentioned today. We also do have them in more markets, of course, but these are the ones I wanted to highlight. And yeah, thank you all for joining the webinar. I want to thank our 3 gentlemen, the speakers who brought all their knowledge today. So yes, thank you. And I wish you all a happy Tuesday. And
by the way, we received some questions, so if someone is interested, you can just let me know, and we are happy to answer the questions over the email.
Yes, indeed. The speaker emails were in your slides, so the slides will also be shared and the recording. So if anyone had further questions, just email the speakers directly. I'll say that. Yeah. Okay. Nice. Thank you, everyone, and I'll smile and wave.
Thank you.